Good evening, everyone. It's Josie with the Rideau Lakes Horticultural Society. Thank you for joining our last virtual meeting of 2020. Tonight we have a panel for you. We have Yvonne, Meg, and John, who worked on the Delta Garden project this year. So we'll show you what it's all about. And I will take you over to Yvonne, and she will take it from here. Enjoy. Go ahead, Yvonne, you're the host now.
Oh, am I? I didn't get a little message saying I was the host. Okay. All right. So I'm Yvonne Helbig. I'm co-president of the society this year, and I guess into next year, given that we won't be having an election of officers due to COVID. So with me are Meg McCallum. She was also part of the Delta Garden Project and is the society secretary. And John Carley, who is a former president of the society, has been with the society for quite a few years. I've never actually asked you, John, how long you've been with the society. Oh, you can't say anything because you're muted. Okay. Maybe that's better. All right. So we'll, now I am going to have to unmute these guys when we start the presentation. I have a few slides to describe the presentation, and then we have a video of the garden as it was just when we put it to bed September the 26th, and a commentary by John through it. And then we will come back to the slideshow for just our conclusions. And as you know, if you have any questions as we're going along, you use the chat at the bottom of the of your screen, and then you can ask whatever questions you might have. So can I unmute them? Jose, or is that something? Yes, okay. Ask to unmute, is that what I do? Okay, ask to unmute, okay. Great, so now Meg and John, you can say things, right?
Super, yep.
Okay, okay, good. So they'll jump in anytime they have something to add to the screens. So now I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the slides. There we go. Okay, and we'll start the slideshow. All right, so there we are. Maybe I'll move these down to the bottom over here. All right, that's better. Okay, so yes, the D3. D3 is the District 3 of the Horticultural Association, the Ontario Horticultural Association. There's 14 societies in it. And we'll get into the first slide here, the genesis of the project. So the D3 board came up with a grant opportunity for plans and programs to help fight climate change. And I said it was the Rideau Lakes Hort Society idea, but it was really John's idea to have an experimental garden to test vegetable cultivars for resilience to heat, drought, and seasonal shift. And Mark Stevens, who couldn't be with us this evening, but his employer, the William Morris at the Lower Beverly Lake Park Manager, he's the Lower Beverly Lake Park Manager, he volunteered a plot for us to use for this garden. Mark, by the way, I should have said earlier, is also a former president of the society. So we submitted our grant application in February, and the grant was awarded to us in March. And I think that was probably just before COVID that it was awarded to us. Okay, so the goal of the project, to identify vegetable cultivars that are resilient to growing conditions in our area with reasonable performance, example, yield, health, pest resilience, in our changing climate. So this was our proposal. We would cultivate a 20 by 20 foot plot. We do vegetable crops common to our area. We use biodynamic practices. We would use no commercial chemical amendments to the soil or the plants, and no shading or watering. We did water a little bit when we transplanted and when we seeded, but other than that, not. And we would include both heritage and box store cultivars. So some key events that happened, we had a planning meeting in March, on March the 12th, followed by indoor seeding for selected crops. And that was mostly Meg who did that. Thank you very much, Meg.
You're welcome.
And we're having problems with the cultivator at the park in May, so that delayed planting to Sunday, June the 7th. I'll have more to say about the delay in planting later on in the presentation, because of course it was delayed a little bit because of COVID as well, and the late spring that we had. We did do a little watering during the first 2 weeks because we had a heat wave immediately following the planting. We did some harvesting of beans and a few tomatoes in July and August. And then we did the final harvest and putting the garden to bed Saturday, September 26th. So this is what the plot looked like before cultivating. We weren't very inspired when we saw it. We did quite a bit of work moving all of this stuff here out of the way, and they had very thoughtfully left us a bunch of bags, the park administration, full of leaves for mulching. But we needed to cultivate first, so we had to move those all over to the side. And initially we had said 20 by 20, but this was quite a narrow space. So we decided to do 40 by 10 instead. So that's what happened there. So now the cultivars, the vegetables that we did in the cultivars, I don't know if I should go through all of these one by one, but you can see we did kale. There's 3 slides of this. So there's kale, beets, cabbage, carrots, turnips, rutabagas, tomatoes, beans, corn, potatoes, onions, and squash. Oops, I wanted to go back. Let me just see. Previous. Oh, I don't know if that's Mark or not, but I can't really get it right now. Yeah, I don't know if you can even hear it. My phone is ringing. Okay, so the kale. So I guess what is important to see you can refer to this at your leisure once it's on our YouTube channel, and then you can just go slide by slide and write down whatever you want. But you can see that we did a mix of heirloom and box store kind of seeds, and seed exchange, and organic local heirloom and organic seed distributors. Some of the things we experimented also with, in some cases we did seedlings, and in some cases we did direct seed to soil. So that was a difference too. And so we'll just go, I think, continue on to the next slide. I just want to point out though that the onions and the, let me see, yes, and the corn, the kind of box store stuff that we were using for those two. In the case of the corn, it didn't come up on our first planting, so John reseeded it using a different source, the same variety, super sweet, but from a different source, July 12th. And then the onions, they were planted later also. They were planted June 9th, not at our initial planting. Okay. So one thing that we did put on the plants was these biodynamic particles that that John has, that we like to call pixie dust. we use that term of endearment with them. Okay, so what they are, they're fine quartz crystals that carry electromagnetic frequencies from the radionic transmitter. And the frequencies stimulate plants to use more nutrients and moisture from the air and soil through their usual photosynthesis process. The result is that nutrient and sugar, i.e. carbon levels, are higher. And if the plants produce more of these, more sugar and carbon during the day than they require, they're sequestered in the soil overnight. So this increases the yield significantly, and it has an added bonus of decreasing carbon in the atmosphere. So we'll just continue on, I think, unless there's questions about that later. Okay, so Mark very carefully took notes of the rainfall. So he did it by every day, but that would have been too big a chart to include in this slideshow. So I did it week by week. So you can see that there was that real dry spell right after we planted. Then we had a deluge, and then we had another big dry spell for 2 weeks in July, and then it was, you know, kind of up and down from there. And then we wanted to keep track of cooling degree days as well, or you can also do growing heat days, but I couldn't find a website that had anything other than the accumulation for that. So as opposed to a day by day or week by week breakdown. So I use these instead, the cooling degree days. Basically what the graph shows, each point on the graph. So say we start here June the 10th, it's at 6. So that's 6 degrees above 15.5 centigrade. And that 6 is the mean temperature for the day. That's the maximum temperature minus the minimum temperature divided by 2. And and then that's over there. So you can see here in the week of the 22nd of July, 18. So that's pretty significant. And when I was doing these slides, I noticed, okay, 22nd July was also when we had 0 rainfall. So we had, so that's pretty hard on plants, you know, no water and an 18-degree cooling day. So that's, those plants had to put up with a lot. So I have a few pictures here of how they looked in August. I went over, I think, about August 25th or 6th. So here we have beans. Those are the green beans and the Beurre de Rocancourt, which were the heritage organic ones. Both of them were very good producers, and although you can see there's a lot more foliage on the green beans that were just bulk beans from Baker than on the Berta Rocancourt. But the Berta Rocancourt were good producers. They did produce a lot of beans. And the kale, so this was the kale from the seedlings. You'll see in the video what the kale that we planted by seed looked like. And boy, I'm a true believer in using seedlings now because the difference between the two was just incredible. And kale is not something that I usually plant in advance of putting. I usually do direct to soil, so I'm going to be changing my gardening practices after this little experiment. So here, this is the Rutabagas, and much to our surprise, it was the box store ones that came up. They didn't get very big, probably because of the conditions, and also we didn't thin them. But the other ones didn't come up at all, didn't germinate. And here we have the turnips. Both varieties did equally well. I think the purple top ones, though, that were the generic box store, produced the bigger roots than the other one. These were the beets. Pretty sad. Yeah, I think those were the box store beets. Of course, they were again from seed, whereas the seedlings did produce a fair sized bulb, you know, about this big, but not anything to write home about. And these were the one of the tomato varieties. I got these seeds from Geraldine Baker, who got them from the Mackenzies at Perth Farmers Market. So they were local seeds that had been saved by the Mackenzies. These tomatoes, okay, they're a plum variety, so they're not very big. But we also did a bit of an experiment of planting, putting some of the tomatoes on frames and others just letting them grow on the ground. And these ones were on the ground, but unlike your usual tomato, they did not rot at all, even though they were in damp conditions and, you know, with fetid ground underneath them. They did not rot. They're still very firm, lovely tomatoes. So that's a very good variety. So I think I'll pass you over now to, I'll stop the share and pass you over to Jose again so that she can play the video for you. So, yes, I come up to Jose and I say, make her the host. There we go.
Oh, I am the host.
Over to you, Jose.
Okay, so I'm just going to mute everyone while the video's playing so that we can get the best optimized sound. All right, and here we go.
Oh, we're live. Okay, John, tell us about the garden here. What happened over the summer?
Well, initially we had a lot of dry weather. This was not virgin ground, it was almost barren ground. So it was a real challenge to grow anything here. The three of us that got together, actually four, and filled it up, which was a bit of a problem because this was actually fill that had come from other places. It's not fertile soil. Should we go into a little bit of the history of why we did this?
Yes, please.
I think that this was sort of set up as an opportunity to see what could be done under dire circumstances, particularly when we're looking at climate change. So we gave this a real hard job to do. We didn't do any fertilizing. We didn't put any manures on it. We did have some leaf mold, but not enough, nor was it properly cured to really do a good job as leaf mold.
Yeah, we were using the leaves more as mulch, really, than fertilizer. Yeah.
And they did a good job.
They did a good job of mulching. As you can see, there's not many weeds. Over here on the side, where there was still like a band of grass after the cultivating, that has certainly encroached on the garden, so we might next time put something on top of that to more like a carpet or something to stop it from...
Well, I think if we're talking about next time, we should just dig that out right to the fence.
Right to the fence, yeah. Good idea. Okay.
And then
Oh, here comes Mark. Come on, Mark, get in the picture here. Over here. Come over here.
Come on in. I didn't dress to be on the old. So, this is not film. This is not a show.
Yeah. So John is just giving a little bit of the history of why we were doing this, and we've talked about the cultivating, that it was a bit of a challenge. I don't know if you want to say a word or two about that, since you were the one who did the cultivating.
That is what it is. It's a long time ago. It'll go easier now. We had breakdowns. We had problems with
With the machinery, yeah.
For sure.
Okay, and we did put some stuff on the plants when we planted them. What was that stuff that you put on, John?
Oh, that was some biodynamic energy materials that I've been able to acquire, and it kind of worked, but I guess it was just a little bit too much for it to overcome.
Too much of a
Yeah.
challenge, yeah.
I want to turn the camera around and look at that kale.
Yeah.
It shows what can be done under. That was one of the better areas of the garden.
Yes.
But it's interesting that the large kale was from plants, seedlings,
Right.
so they were off to a good start. And I should mention that this garden was never watered.
Right.
We had a lot of dry weather.
Right.
And
Right after it was planted.
we did water the plants when we transplanted, but we didn't
Yeah.
at all season.
How many days without rain
I think
initially?
it was 23 straight days
23.
after planting
Right.
with no rain.
With no rain. Okay. And yet the kale did so well, whereas this stuff that grew from seed really never took off.
Yeah.
Because
Simply because we didn't have the moisture.
right.
That's 80%. The seeds couldn't germinate properly, so they were later coming off.
Yeah.
But the carrots did all right.
Yeah, the carrots are doing fine. Of course, we didn't thin them. So we're going to have, hold that one up that you pulled out there, John. So we're going to have probably, and there's a couple of bites out of it, you say?
No, there's a couple of bites.
Oh, there's a couple of bites of carrot there. Yeah, and MJ thinks that we could use the rest in pickled carrots, maybe. Okay, and maybe we'll just go row by row. The other thing we were doing was experimenting with with heritage seeds and organic seeds versus
The more modern seeds.
the garden variety that you'd get at Canadian Tire or other places. So that might be a factor in the kale also,
True.
because the seedlings were the heritage seeds, and the seed by seed kale. This one was OSC, I think.
Yes.
So that's the kale. Then the beets. I'll have to get in close here for you to see the beets.
The potential there for a decent beet. There's another one there.
Yeah.
So they did grow from seed.
Well, no, these ones were seedlings.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Those ones were seedlings. These ones that were from seed they, again, really didn't take off. Not very much germination, and the plants remained very small. That's about the biggest one right there. So, okay. So this is the cabbage. So, yeah, we might, one of our group discovered insect netting this season, and I think we might have to look into that for next time, if there's a next time, because these cabbages were really ravaged by the moths, even though they were the heritage variety and started from and they were seedlings. And these were the ones that were from seed, the garden variety, and there's a little bit of difference in size and heading, but you know, they actually did quite well, all things considered. Okay, so the carrots, oh, my shadow's getting in the picture here. Should stand on this side. Okay, so the carrots, there's not much difference that I can see between the heritage variety, which is over here, and the garden variety over here. That one that you pulled up is from that's the garden variety, and did quite well. Again, this suffers from not having been thinned. So probably if we had been over here thinning, it would have made a difference in the growth.
The heritage variety germinated much better.
Right. Right, because they were both from seed, of course. Yeah. Okay, then we have the purple top turnips.
Rutabagas, yeah.
No, those are the turnips.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay, and so that's the heritage variety up there, and they did quite well. Look at that. Look at the size of that one. That's a nice big turnip there. And then these are a garden variety, and they're all white. They're not purple top, but and they've actually done quite well too. Here's a few big ones over there. Okay, then these are the Rutabagas. Now, in this case, the heritage variety didn't even germinate.
No.
I think that's the heritage variety.
Yes.
I mean, if we were consistent in where we put things. Yes, this is, I won't give the brand, but yeah, those were, and this was all by seed, from seed. The Rutabagas. And
mediocre, but
they're pretty mediocre, yeah.
of thinning.
Again, we should have thinned, yeah. Okay, so the tomatoes, you can see we didn't harvest in time, so there's quite a bit of waste here.
There's nothing to be learned from that.
Yeah, well, except that this purple variety over here is, I don't know if I've got it on screen. Do I have it on screen? Yes, I do. Okay, so they seem to be more resilient to
That's right, yeah.
to mold and things, so to rot. And I picked some too, and yeah, they're still in very good shape. So that's interesting.
They're much more.
Yes. Here's some nice beef steaks.
Yeah, these are.
Okay. The purple ones are. Yeah, these two are beef, just regular beef steak.
Delicious.
Delicious they're called, yeah. Okay.
But they're not, the integrity of the delicious is not as great as the heritage.
Right.
These tomatoes are really in good shape.
That's
They're
right.
very firm.
Yeah, even though they've been lying on the ground. Yeah. Okay. Then we had beans, so we had yellow beans and green beans. Now, I don't know if any of those were heritage. Were they? Oh yes, these yellow beans, right? Bird Rokencore. Yes. Right, right. Now, I picked these, the yellow ones, I think twice. No, once. Yeah, I did the yellow one. No, twice. Yeah, I did it twice. So, I probably got, I would say, a quart of beans altogether off these little plants. And, or 2 quarts, yeah. What are the big baskets? No, those are 4 quarts. Okay, 4 quarts. So I probably got about 4 quarts of beans off of here. And the green beans, I think you picked them once, John?
Yes.
And I picked them a couple of times, although this last time there wasn't so much. So they were good producers too. And you can see there's still some beans on there. So they did very well. So both varieties, I would say, didn't have as much germination, I think, on the heritage. Yeah. Interesting.
This was the only regular variety of the modern varieties that exceeded
Our expectations.
other than the heritage in the Rutabagas.
The Rutabagas, yeah, which didn't germinate at all. Okay, so we come to the corn. Yes, well, we did have, the corn came up, and both varieties, and there were cobs on there until the raccoons got to them. Thank you.
They said thank you.
Despite our sophisticated pest control.
Actually, there was only one row of corn. This was the heritage variety.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We never got
The
any.
other variety did not germinate.
Oh, did not germinate. Okay, that would have been right here.
That's right.
Okay.
Same happened with the potatoes. Only the reverse. The heritage varieties did not come up,
Oh, okay.
and the modern ones did.
Did. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and of course we didn't hill the potatoes or the corn, so, or the onions, and there they are laying on the top. So, did we own, oh yeah, there's another row there, so a row didn't come up.
It did. These were all sacks, yeah.
Right.
Well, this was a heritage.
Uh,
They came up. They were transplants.
oh, they were transplants. Okay. The sets didn't come up. Okay.
There, but they just did not do it.
Okay.
You can't even find one that's still alive.
No.
They did survive for a while, but the heritage seedlings did very well,
Yeah.
considering the soil type and everything.
That's right. Okay, so what are our plans going ahead?
The next year, you mean?
Yeah. Or do you have any overall comments, Mark and John, about how things went this year and lessons learned?
Typical of 2020.
All right, so we are back, and I'm going to unmute our panel.
Oop.
There we go.
Okay. My picture back on.
So, you can probably just unmute everyone and see if anyone has any questions. I have a question about I guess the varmint control, is that like there was no fence or anything and that's the only thing the raccoons ate was the corn?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had strung, we had stakes and strung rope between the stakes, and there was fence on the one side already, and then we added the tin plates and grocery bags, the rustle in the wind. Yeah, that was our pest control. And yes, the raccoons only touched the corn. That was the only thing they went for.
In that area, probably not wise to try to grow corn. In another garden, another test garden.
Yeah, that was one
We
of
do it
our
next year, and I kind of think it's a good idea if we do.
conclusions. Yeah.
So is next year dependent on if we get another plot or I guess volunteer?
Well, I think we'd stick with the same plot. Well, maybe if you want to put the host back over to me, I'll finish the presentation,
Okay, yeah.
and then because there's a whole slide on our conclusions.
All right. And here you go.
Okie doke. So I'll share my screen again. Okay, just jump down to the okay, just above that. Okay, so I did want to say something about COVID, because it did certainly have an impact on the project. The initial ban on community gardens, I don't know if if everybody remembers that, but initially community gardens were one of the things that weren't going to be allowed at all under COVID. And a bunch of us signed a petition that the province finally reversed their position on that and would allow community gardens with the local public health unit defining what protocols had to be followed for them. But that was quite well into the gardening season before that happened. So even though we'd done our planning and we had our plants, Meg had all our plants ready to go, we didn't know if we'd be doing the garden or not. So that kind of put a wrench in the works. Finding and purchasing seed. Yeah, that was one of the pushes for community gardens being okay, was that everybody and their uncle were turning to gardening when COVID started. Being afraid, that there was definitely a fear of food security. So it became very difficult to find seeds and also plants later on. COVID also prevented us from getting together to further develop and coordinate our initial plan. So I think we would have been more organized about the planting if we had been able to meet. We were unable to recruit volunteers from the park. That was one of the things that we had said we were going to do as part of raising awareness of climate change impact on gardening. And we were unable to do the proposed information tours to increase awareness of climate impact on gardens. So those are two things that happened that didn't happen because we did this under COVID. So our conclusions from the first year, Yes, we're thinking of adding leaf mulch before the winter to amend the soil for next year in that plot. The leaf mulch will be provided by the park management, which is very generous of them. We would get started earlier so the plants can establish before we get the heat of the summer. We need to accommodate to the land's features. As you saw in the video, we would cultivate right to the fence to deter weed growth at that edge. And yeah, oh yeah, my camera stopped working before I could get to the squash plot, which was kind of over to the side. It was way too shady there. So if we grow squash again, we would move it to the fence, and then it can grow vertically, actually. And we'll drop crops that are prone to pests, i.e. the corn. Another thing is to eliminate the need for early harvest. We want this garden that we can just put it in the spring, not do anything to it, and come back in the fall and reap the benefits. So tomatoes are not a good crop because you have to be harvesting tomatoes during the season. Same thing happened with the beans, the snap beans, you know, they mature earlier than the other vegetables that we planted. So John did go and harvest them, and so did I. So next year, what we might do is instead of having a snap bean, switch to a varietal that's harvested when it's for dried beans. And okay, so thinning, of course, is another thing that we don't want to have to do. So John suggested that we purchase a seeder for more precise planting of small seeds such as carrots and turnips and the rutabagas, and then we wouldn't need to worry about thinning. As I mentioned, I think we want to use seedlings as much as possible versus direct planting, so we'll have to take a look at that. And something that Meg has brought up was we need a better definition of our seed selection criteria. It's, you know, we said during the video the heritage did okay and the other one didn't, but a lot of the stuff that we got from box stores actually said heritage on it, or heirloom seeds. So what are we actually after here? Are we looking for heritage? Are we looking for organic? Are we looking for open pollinated? Are we looking for seeds that are locally saved? So we need to talk a little bit more about what we're trying to accomplish. Another idea would be to research the varietals that are in the grocery stores. They're not usually identified what variety they are of the particular vegetable, but perhaps if we found that out, then those would be the generic box store brand as opposed to some other kinds of varieties of the vegetables that might do better. Are we looking for plants not from this area, but that are bred to grow in our conditions, as opposed to plants that are seeds that are from this area, or plants that are common to this area? So those are some of the things I think that we need to consider for future times. Our last slide is just the team. So that's everything about the experiment. If there's any other questions, my panelists and myself are, and Meg or John, if you have anything to add. And I don't know if we've answered all of your questions, Jose, so please jump in again if you have anything else that you want to say.
Well, I always have questions. Well, I just think, first of all, it was such a good idea. So you know, kind of congratulations, because just to even do this project, to be able to plant something in the spring, not do anything and see what comes up in the fall, I think can go a long ways, you know, in this area to let people know what works. And for, you know, food security, we've talked a lot about that, and I'm really hoping that there is a next year. And I thought that the things that Meg brought up about defining what's box store, I think that that's really important too, because I was kind of wondering myself, what does that mean? So, yeah.
And from my perspective, it was really interesting to see the what the garden looked like in September. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend on the day that you did the garden wrap up. But a lot of the plants that were grown in the demonstration garden were the same varieties that I was growing at home. And I can tell you that my white turnips did not produce nice big fat turnips like that. And I think it did have to do with the timing, as well as with the you know, the growing conditions. That when I planted my white turnips here, I started them in the early spring, which is typically what you do. Turnips are more of a cold season crop. But this spring was ridiculously cold. So my turnips didn't warm up until that heat came along, and then they just bolted. So it's interesting to see that the turnips that were planted in June actually did okay, and by September they were just nice big turnips. Yeah, so interesting to see what happens when you plant at different times, and you know, the dealing with the vagaries of the changing weather patterns that we have. I think we are getting used to more drought in the summer, but also more torrential rains, more periods of intense heat. But I was definitely surprised by the very, very long, cold spring that we had. So, you know, it's something to think about as we try to plan our gardens around climate change.
Right. Yeah. John, do you have anything to add?
And I think it was a great experience we had, and I didn't think it was so important to begin with, that this was really not good soil. It was very, very, very poor soil. So, and the fact that we didn't have any manures or chemical fertilizers, any type of fertilizers other than the pixie dust, as you describe it, it didn't hit me at the time when we were planning this, nor did it until later on in the season. But if you notice, the kale did extremely well. And one of the reasons I believe is that, and I know this for a fact, the plants are the ones that do it's almost like self-fertility, and they pick up energy from the atmosphere. But the plants have to be going. They have to be alive and well and able to do that. And I think this is why we didn't have as good a result, because when you just seed stuff, it takes so long for them to get going and really working to feed themselves. So if you have plants that are pretty well developed, like those kale seedlings were. Now, they weren't huge, you know, but they were well established.
Yeah.
So they were ready to take advantage of that pixie dust. And we got to remember that, so that maybe we should use a little bit of organic fertilizer in certain situations to get the plants started. Just a very little bit, but to actually feed the plants before they're able to feed themselves. I know in my own garden this year, I have the biggest crop that I've ever had. but I'm running on the 4th and 5th season with that program.
Mhm.
So it's working, you know. And I use some of the same variety of seed for corn. I had corn stalks that were over an inch across at the base, and every plant had one or some of them had 3, most of them had 2. I usually picked at least 2 cobs off of every plant,
Yeah.
so it worked well. And Meg, you saw some of the carrots,
Yes.
and I've got bigger ones too. I had just a huge crop of this year, even in potatoes. That's growing almost in sand. Amazing. So I know it works, but I just didn't think of that early enough that we should take that into consideration when we
Mhm.
plant it. That
Right.
needs something to help the plants get started, because there was really no nutrients or very little nutrient in that soil.
Yeah, Mark had mentioned that about the squash. You know, the squash was all from seedlings, but because it was in shaded area and the soil there too was totally sand. Like
Yeah.
there
Oh,
was
yes.
really nothing to the soil there at all. I think that's why we got nothing out of the squash. I mean, there were a few blossoms when we harvested that on September 26th, but it was not going to mature into anything this season.
Mm.
So
Was
I
the
have,
squash started from seed or were they
They were seedlings.
okay.
Yeah.
I have a question for John about the pixie dust. I'm sure people are wondering because it all sounds so mysterious. Now you talked about how you're on a program. I'm sure people might be interested in learning more about how they can get their hands on some of that. How does it work? Can you talk about that in any way, or is it a secret?
That could be an hour program by itself. It's a proprietary material, and it's been developed. I've been working with this chap for 20 years, and we use quartz crystals, and they're potentized by using radionic instruments, and they transmit the frequencies, the beneficial nutrients that plants need to these crystals, and the crystals in turn transfer those to the plants. So it actually stimulates the plants to use more, for example, carbon dioxide from the air and other elements that are in the air as well. So it increases the health of the plant, and it also increases the ability of the power of the plants to augment itself from the air. Anybody wants to get in touch with me, I guess my email was up there, and
Yeah.
it takes a little explanation, and it's not easy to grasp this, but I don't use any fertilizers or compost in my garden at all. I never have. We do a lot of this for conventional farmers too, because well, it just augments the value of the fertilizer, but a lot of farmers are able to cut their chemical fertilizer requirements by a half, and there's the odd one that goes to 0 if they've got livestock on the farm.
Sounds like we have a good topic to start us off next month or next year when we start our next speaker series.
We can do that.
Good. Well, I think that's probably it then for tonight. Thank you for joining us, those of you who did, MJ and Cecilia. And we'll look forward to probably continuing with this kind of thing next year. We're taking a little vacation. The board will be meeting, but not the society over winter, as is our want. We don't usually meet over winter anyway. So we'll take a little holiday, probably December, January, February, and hope to start up again in March with something, March or April. I will be putting out a newsletter for December, and we'll be looking at continuing to work on projects and do the kinds of things that the society usually does. So thanks again, and thank you, Jose, especially for being the resource that you've been to the society over this year. We would not have been able to do any of this without you. So we're very thankful that you're part of our group and that you've offered to help us out in this way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm glad to do it. You know, really glad to work with a great bunch of people like you guys. And I'm just the tech girl, but we had to make it happen. We've had a lot of positive feedback, so you know, it's nice that people can watch later on in the convenience of their home. So
That's right. Yeah. Okay. With that, we'll say goodbye then. Good night, and happy holidays for everybody. That'll be coming up soon. See you next year.
bye.
Take care.
Bye now.
Night.
Bye-bye.